Ladies and gentlemen, hold your seats and fasten your seatbelts as we now segue and transition into a very gripping and riveting round of fireside chat. And to maneuver that part of conversation, let me call on our virtual stage Dr. Corrie Black, who is Dr. Corrie Block, who is a global expert in organization behavior and executive performance. He's also been touted to be UAE's top business coach, a leadership coach, author, and a speaker who specializes in the realm of adapt, innovation, and disruption, and comes armed with an experience of 25 plus years and has worked with 100 plus organizations across 30 continents. He's a pioneer in neuro skills for leadership and organizational performance. So on this note, I'll leave the virtual stage to these very learned gentlemen for a lovely conversation exchange. So Dr. Corrie Block, over to you.
Thank you so much. It's really amazing to be with you all. And I have Marshall, that was an amazing session. I really appreciated that. I mean, personally as well, like not just for everybody and not just as a session. I think personally it's been really impactful. I remember a week ago, we had our first like face-to-face, and for me, that conversation was fantastic, mostly because you called me out on my own crap and it was awesome. And that's actually the first thing I want to talk about is if you would entertain me in a little bit of a discussion about authenticity in leadership, because as you touched on, when leaders are tired, when they're hungry, when they're impatient, when they're weary, it's showtime, okay? And there's not a lot of room for give on that. Somebody's got to be on stage at that time. And that is, for a lot of leaders, it's inauthentic. But they can't show the weaknesses, or they feel like they can't show or be transparent about the weaknesses that they have. And so I'm just wondering, like, from your perspective, what's the balance between showtime and authenticity?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah, and to me, it's being a professional. That's it. It's not being a phony, it's being a professional.
Right.
When you're asked to do a job, you're asked to do a job, and you are a professional. And when you are a professional, that doesn't mean you talk about my foot hurts or my aunt died last week. That doesn't mean you're a phony. That just means you're a professional. See, there's a difference in authenticity between two terms. One is honesty, and the second term is disclosure. I may think my boss is a total ass. I'm under no moral, legal, or ethical obligation to tell that to the world. So we confuse these two terms, honesty and disclosure. Yeah. Honesty is a great thing. Those, my friends, Alan Mullally and Francis Hesselbein and Hubert Joly, they're very honest people. They're very real, they're very honest, and everyone loves them. On the other hand, they're also professional people. Right. They don't whine, they don't complain, they don't talk about my foot hurts. My friend Alan said, when I frown, the stock goes down. Right. If I frown, that stock goes down. It's showtime. One of the great people in my group, I have this group of 100 coaches. And over the COVID period, we have met, every weekend we met 60 people. And these are amazing people from around the world. Every weekend we talked about life. And what you learn when you do this is we all have issues. Nobody gets a pass in life. You can look at these people and think they're like the second coming of God. You get to know them. You think $1 billion is going to make you happy? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I work with a lot of people who are billionaires, and some are very happy and some are miserable. Well, I learned a lot in these sessions. And one of the guys in our group, and going back to answer your question, is Telly Leon. Telly played the role of Aladdin in the play Aladdin on Broadway for 3 years. He gave the same performance literally 1,000 times. In our group, one of the women was Margot Georgiadis. Margot was complaining about, I had to make the same presentation when I'm selling Ancestry.com. I had to make the same exact presentation 16 times. Now, of course, she sold Ancestry.com for $4.75 billion to Blackstone and probably made $300 or $400 million. Poor me, I had to say the same thing 16 times, and I only made $400 or $500 million. Wow. So I said to Margot, 16 times, 16 times. I said, Telly, how many times did you play Aladdin on Broadway? He said, about 1,000 times. So I asked Telly, how did you maintain this enthusiasm and motivation? Now, Telly is a little guy. He's gay, probably wasn't really easy childhood. He said, when I was a little boy, I went to a Broadway theater show when I was 8 years old. And it was so music and dancing, and I loved it so much. It was such a wonderful experience. I never forgot it. He said, you know, every time I go out there on stage, I think of that little boy. He said, that show is for that boy. So I think, you know, back to authenticity, what are we there for? He's not there for himself. He's there for that little boy. So back to authenticity, too much of authenticity, people think about what's going on with me. Well, if we get rid of that stuff and think, what am I going to do for them? It's a whole lot easier to be authentic.
Yeah, but then we end up with the same, well, not the same, but kind of, if the pendulum swings too far in the other direction, then we end up in an imposter syndrome, where we're showing ourselves to be stronger than we actually feel on the inside, and hiding lack of capacity or lack of competency or something else that leaders consistently struggle with. And we can't talk about those things with our board of directors. We can't talk about those things with our coworkers, our colleagues. Right. Very often we can't talk about those things with our bosses, and certainly not with our employees.
Of course not.
So,
that's why people have coaches.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Then everybody else to talk to. By the way,
that's why we have a profession.
Yeah, one person said in our little group of 60 people, that's 1 hour. We have 6 1-hour sessions, and they rotate various groups.
Yeah.
You know, he said it's nice that 1 hour a week I get to be a human being.
Yeah, it's true. I hear the same from my clients.
Yeah, you can't have people just talk. Not in the new world with social media. Forget it. You know, it's hard out there. And by the way, there's an old saying, it's lonely at the top.
Yes.
I'm going to change that. Today, it is lonelier at the top.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
It is way lonelier at the top than it's ever been.
Yeah.
It's tough today. It's social media, people being criticized, cancel culture. It's hard. Yeah. It is very, very hard. So, you know, that's why I think it's very important to at least have a support group.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about the 60 people in our group is we'll try to help each other.
And do you find that there's a good level of authenticity in that group?
Oh, yeah.
But not, I wouldn't imagine there would be complete transparency, but at least some level of authenticity that they wouldn't find elsewhere.
We're dealing here with very big people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like if you're the president of the World Bank, and you either trust people or you don't, or if you're the CEO here in the United States, or if, you know, Pau Gasol, a great basketball star from Spain, is in our group. Curtis Martin, one of the great football players of history, is in our group. These are adults. And so you're either there or you're not there.
Yeah, exactly. So what in arenas like that, like your 60, that can build that level of authenticity among each other, because they can't have it in their, let's say, in their persona on stage. When they're on stage, they're in character, but off stage, they're with each other, right? And one of the things that that I've wanted to bring in to the discussion on spirituality and management is loving the other people on the ladder with you. And that's not a word that we typically use in business. Do you find that your crowd, your crew are actually getting closer to that idea that, you know, it's not just about connecting with the people at home and working with the people at work, but actually you can connect and love the people on the ladder with you?
Yeah. I mean, one of the great leaders I've ever met in my life is Alan Mulally. If you get a chance, you should read the book. It's called American Icon, Story of His Life. And he has a saying, love them up.
Yeah.
And so every day he tries to love people.
Well, I hear that theme rising up a lot, actually, in leadership theory now. And for me, my favorite leadership book of all time is Servant Leadership by Robert Greenleaf. I'm sure that you've read it. And I've read it a dozen times. And for me, that ethos of being able to bring value to the lives of the people around you, whether they're colleagues or, you know, part of your community of practice or your employer or your employees, I think that resonates a lot with me. And those are some of the softest skills that that I find, but they're not, we call them the softest skills, but actually they're the hardest. They're the most difficult skills to apply, because we have this fake division between work and life. I found that we are expected to perform a certain way, and that certain way at work is to be less loving and more transactional. And I think that we become more effective when we question those narratives and we become more loving and less transactional. Do you find the same?
Sure. Yes.
Brilliant. Like, what do you think, other than the age of distraction, which I think is, killing a lot of our leaders now, what else do you think we should be giving up in leadership these days? Because, like you said, what got you here isn't going to get you there. So we need to be giving up things that we think were effective in the past in order to adapt to, the new normal or the next future, or our future forward, or what do you call it? Feed forward? The feed forward that we want. What are some of the practices in leadership that you see are things that we should be starting to give up?
All right, let me ask the group a question. If the answer is yes, raise your hand. Anybody in the group brought up as a Hindu? Yeah, we have a few there. People have been brought up as Hindus. So I'm going to give you some good advice from a very famous poem called the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, to me, the Bhagavad Gita is a wonderful, wonderful way to look at life, and especially during times of rapid change. So I think, back to your good question, dealing with these times of rapid change and craziness, the Gita is a great place to look. Now, if we look at the story of the Gita, what do you see? Well, you see a person who's the protagonist there, and he's two choices in life. He has one choice that's very hard and another choice that's worse. It's two choices: bad, worse. And he's talking to Krishna, and this is the manifestation of Krishna. Oh, this is so bad, and this is bad, and then this is worse, and this is bad, this is worse. What's the message he gets, which is a very important message? A few key messages, which I think really answer your question. One message is, what is. What is. Don't waste your life complaining that what is. It is what it is. Sometimes in life, we have two choices, one that's bad and the other is worse. Okay, it is what it is. Number two, have a clear strategy, figure out what you want, and then don't get fixated on the results or outcomes. That's a key point of the Bhagavad Gita. Don't get fixated on the results or outcomes, which you may or may not be able to control. Do your best. Focus and do your best. That's the message of the Gita. A wonderful message for life. And back to this business of focus and making peace. That's a great message. Look, it is what it is. It is what it is. Make peace with what is. Have a clear strategy, a clear focus, and then do that. I'm going to give you a parable, the parable of the golfer. The golfer is playing his little country club, and he's a chance to win the championship. He's so excited. There's a chance to win. He's on the last hole. But right before he hits the ball, there's this group in front of him drinking beer, noisy, loud, very angry. Idiots. But he calms down. He hits his final shot on the last hole. He has a chance to win. Looks perfect. The ball goes off into the rough. Terrible. What happened? It hit something. He walks toward the ball. He sees a beer can. The idiots in front of him have left a beer can. He is so angry. What does a golfer need to do? Stop, breathe. Forget about the beer can. Forget about the drive. Forget about the championship. You walk toward that ball and you develop a strategy. You've got your strategy. You breathe. You forget about the outcome. You hit the shot in front of you. You hit the shot in front of you. That's such great advice for the new world. People need to be able to focus and hit the shot in front of you. Don't get lost on what you can't change. Don't get lost on what you can't do. Hit the shot in front of you. Now, there's one thing I didn't cover earlier, and I said we'd leave it out, but now I'll cover it because it does deal with your question. I'm now going to teach you what I didn't teach you before that is in the outline. And that's the 6-question coaching process, which answers your question exactly. About every 2 to 3 months, have a dialogue with each of your direct reports. And you deal with 6 questions. Question number 1, where are we going? I'd say, here's where I see us going as an organization, and then ask a person, where do you think we should be going? Now, here's a very important point during periods of rapid change that you mentioned. Things may change. And you have to be honest with that and say, look, here's where we're going now. I'm not saying this is going to last for 6 years or 6 months. The world is changing rapidly. Right now, here's the top priorities. Question number 2, where are you going? Here's where I see you and your part of the business going. Where do you think you should be going? Question number 3, doing well. Here's what I think you and your part of the business are doing very well. And then ask the person a question. What do you think you're doing well? What are you most proud of? What are you proud of? Question 4, ideas for the future. Let's say this is feed forward. As your manager, here's ideas that I think might help things get better in the future. And then ask the person a question. If you were the mentor, coach, or advisor for you, what ideas might you have for you? A great coaching question. If you were the mentor, coach, or advisor for you, what ideas would you have for you? My friend George Borst, I did this, was the CEO of Toyota Financial Services, a multi-$100 billion business. And George said he was a little hesitant about question 4. That question about if you were the coach for you, what ideas would you have? He thought people would just say fluffy things. He said he was very surprised. More than half the time, he ended up saying, you know what? I like your idea better than my idea. Let's really focus on what you suggested, not what I suggested. Question number 5, as your leader or your manager, how can I help? And then question 6, here's what I'm trying to improve. What ideas do you have for me? 6 basic questions. Question 1, where are we going? Question 2, where are you going? Question 3, doing well. Question 4, suggestions for the future. Question 5, how can I help? Question 6, suggestions for me. Now, the key to making this entire process work can be summarized in a very simple term. It's called 2 words, mutual responsibility. Mutual responsibility. Now, what does mutual responsibility sound like? It sounds like this. I would say, Mr. or Ms. Direct Report, I'm going to have a regular dialogue with you covering these 6 basic questions. If at any time you have any ambiguity about direction, you feel overcommitted, you're uncertain as to priorities, I want you to take the responsibility to talk to me immediately. I want you to take responsibility to talk with me as your manager. And we're going to sit down and we're going to recalibrate and set priorities. Because if you do your job as my direct report and I do my job, there's 0 reason we should not have alignment and clarity. Yeah. In other words, let's go back to my golfing story. At any second in time, that person needs to know what are the priorities now. At any second in time, back to the golf story, they need to hit the shot in front of them. They need to have a strategy. They walk up and they hit the shot in front of them at any point in time. You have to be honest. This may change. Priorities may change. The business may change. Life may change. That doesn't
really
matter.
Good. It's really good advice.
You need to have clear priorities. And if you have, by the way, I've done this with 8 CEOs, I've done 7 CEOs, pay for results coaching. I got paid 7 times out of 7. John Hancock, CEO Jim Morton, did this. He went in 1 year, in 4 years, he went in providing feedback and coaching from an 8 percentile to a 98. This is all he did. He went from an 8 to a 98. Steve Sanger, CEO of General Mills, did this. I can mention the names of my clients. I've had a 100% success rate teaching people to be better coaches just using that process. So very good question. It's a very good process to keep people focused.
That's really good. Because I know that for myself and as maybe with many of you out there, we feel like we don't have just one shot in front of us. We might have 30 or 40. And so it's really good to have those priorities and everything. I just want to say thank you so much, Marshall. We're out of time for the fireside chat, but thank you so much for your time and for blessing us all with your incredible advice and wisdom and your experience. And I'm going to hand you back to